No one had seen the Dragon Prince awake for centuries. Valkyrian skies were a pale gray, the floating crystal cities shimmering dimly against the molten seas below. Magic that once hummed through every street, every tower, now faltered, sputtering like a dying heartbeat. The Dragon Prince, last of the ancient guardians, lay suspended in his crystalline prison, untouched by time, untouched by hope. Sorcerers had tried everything, chanting, rituals, spells, but nothing stirred him. The world outside trembled, waiting, desperate. Kalen leaned against the railing of the Rin's hollow outpost, staring at the distant citadel. Humans were rare here, almost forgotten, scattered among colonies built on ingenuity rather than magic. He had no robes, no spells, no ancestral lineage of sorcery. Just hands calloused from work, eyes sharp from seeing patterns others ignored, and a mind that refused to quit. He studied the citadel through his telescope, tracking the faint pulse of magical energy around the prince's prison. Every flicker, every quiver told a story the sorcerers had missed. To them it was all failure. To Kalen it was a puzzle. A low rumble echoed through the city. Not the usual tremor of Valkyrian's molten seas, but something alive, tense. Kalen felt a shiver run down his spine. The wards around the citadel were failing. If the Dragon Prince awoke suddenly, uncontrolled, the magic could tear the floating fortress apart, and perhaps destroy everything below. Kalen knew he couldn't rely on anyone else. Sorcerers were panicked, arguing over which ritual to try next. He clenched his fists, a spark of determination igniting. Humans didn't have to be powerful, they had to be willing. That willingness could move mountains. Or dragons. Kalen's father had always said, when magic fails, think. When everyone panics, act. He repeated the words in his mind as he packed a small bag. Tools, mechanical devices, basic stabilizers. Nothing magical, nothing fancy. Just enough to bend the world slightly, to make a difference where raw courage might be the only bridge. He glanced once more at the citadel, its spires glinting like broken stars. The thought of entering it alone made his stomach twist, but fear was only a detail. The stakes were too high for hesitation. Valkyrian needed someone who would try when everyone else gave up. The journey across the molten valley was treacherous. Smoke curled in thick clouds, and every step risked sinking into a pool of glowing lava. Kalen moved with care, his boots gripping jagged crystal paths. He encountered shards of magical residue, still alive with unstable energy. A misstep could fry circuits, shatter bones, or ignite explosions. He paused, measuring each movement, studying the patterns of the lingering magic. Humans had no innate protection here, no shields, no wards. Only sharp eyes, steady hands, and calm thinking. He thought of the Dragon Prince, trapped and silent, and forced himself forward. At night, Kalen camped under a cliff that overlooked the citadel. The city lights reflected on the molten seas, painting the darkness with fragile hope. He studied the magical currents flowing around the fortress. Patterns emerged, subtle and complex. The energy pulsed not like a heartbeat, but like a signal, waiting for something or someone capable of responding. Kalen felt a chill, a weight pressing on his chest. The world had forgotten humans, yet here he was the only one who might save it. Sleep was impossible. He could hear the faint hum of the crystalline cocoon where the Dragon Prince rested. He imagined the scales beneath the crystal, the ancient eyes closed, waiting. And he realized he was the only choice left. By morning, the citadel seemed even more alive, or perhaps more restless. The energy flares were growing, small sparks that shot into the air unpredictably. Sorcerers had abandoned hope in visible despair, leaving Kalen's mind to race ahead. He had to find a way in without triggering the wards, without shattering the fragile cocoon. Every plan had to be perfect. There was no room for mistakes. And yet, deep down, Kalen knew perfection wasn't possible. That was the human edge, the willingness to act even when success seemed improbable. He approached the outer gates of the citadel, the mechanical locks humming faintly. Magical constructs patrolled the paths, half-formed guardians of energy and light, programmed to neutralize intruders. Kalen paused, weighing his options. Fighting them with brute force would fail. Using magic? Impossible. But humans could think differently. He watched patterns, noted timing, and in the shadows, slipped past them using nothing but patience and intuition. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, yet he smiled slightly. This was the first real step. The citadel was enormous, alive, and dangerous, but he was moving. He was in. As he reached the central chamber, the room radiated an eerie glow. The Dragon Prince's crystal prison dominated the space, reflecting fractured light in every direction. Kalen's heart pounded. He felt a mix of fear, awe, and responsibility heavier than he had ever known. If he failed here, all of Valkyrian could collapse into chaos. And yet, if he tried, if he acted, there was a chance. A human chance. A whisper of courage against centuries of silence. Kalen drew a deep breath, stepping closer to the cocoon. He could hear the faint hum of magic against metal, like the planet itself was holding its breath. He raised his voice almost instinctively, not a spell, not a command, just a soft, human whisper. "Wake up." The crystal shivered. Not a roar, not a light, not a spark, just the faintest tremor. Kalen's pulse quickened. Something had answered. Something heard. The world waited, silent, as the impossible began. Kalen's feet crunched over the crystalline path leading into the dragon citadel. The air inside was thick, charged with a strange energy that made his skin tingle. He kept his head low, eyes scanning every corner. The outer wards had been mercifully quiet, but the deeper he went, the more the citadel seemed alive, aware of his presence. Magical constructs floated silently, half-formed shapes of glowing light and sharp crystal edges. One misstep could trigger alarms, or worse, the death of both Kalen and the dragon prince he came to save. The corridors twisted and curved like a labyrinth, designed to confuse intruders and amplify danger. Kalen counted steps, mapped the angles with his tools, and followed the faint pulse of magical energy that surrounded the prince. Every flicker of light was a warning. Every hum of crystal was a signal. Humans didn't have magic, but Kalen had intuition, an instinct sharpened by years surviving in harsh colonies. He moved slowly, deliberately, each motion calculated to avoid the patrols. A construct suddenly appeared, shimmering in midair like a fragment of a star. Its eyes glowed bright blue, scanning for unauthorized movement. Kalen froze, his heart hammering. Then he noticed a pattern. The construct rotated in precise intervals, moving along a fixed path. Using a small mirror he carried, Kalen reflected a fragment of light to distract it. The construct paused, tilted its head, and continued on its route. Kalen slipped past, careful not to make a sound. He felt a surge of relief but quickly pushed it aside. The citadel was far from conquered. He entered a room where the magic pulsed so strongly it made the floor hum beneath his boots. Crystal shards floated in the air, orbiting invisible cores. One misjudged step, one wrong move, and the shards would slice through him. Kalen took a deep breath, remembering his father's advice. When magic fails, think. When everyone panics, act. He studied the pattern, timing the floating shards like a dancer navigating a storm. Step by step, he moved through the room, muscles tense, eyes sharp. The shards grazed his sleeve, sparks flying, but he did not falter. Beyond the room, the chamber doors were sealed with an ancient lock that glowed with dormant energy. Sorcerers would have tried to break it with spells, likely triggering defensive wards. Kalen, however, had no such luxury. He knelt, unpacking his tools. Tiny mechanical devices, cables, pulleys, simple human tools against centuries of magic. He traced the energy lines with careful hands, analyzing how the lock responded to pressure, to sound, to touch. After tense minutes, a quiet click echoed and the doors slid open. The citadel seemed to hold its breath. Kalen didn't smile. One door opened, but the dragon prince still waited, silent and fragile. The chamber beyond was vast, walls lined with pulsating crystals, their light reflecting in fractured rainbows. In the center, the cocoon of the dragon prince hovered, suspended in a lattice of glowing magic. Kalen stepped closer, feeling the raw power of the prince's life force. Even sleeping, the dragon radiated authority, a presence older than the citadel itself. Kalen's chest tightened, not fear but awe. He remembered the colonies he left behind, humans surviving with nothing but grit and courage. This was his moment to prove that determination could match magic. A sudden tremor shook the chamber. A protective ward had detected his presence. Energy lines sparked across the floor, threatening to ignite. Kalen reacted instantly, dropping a small stabilizer device to absorb the surge. Sparks flew, some hitting the walls, some missing him by inches. His hands were steady, heart racing, mind calculating every reaction. Humans could be fragile, but ingenuity, quick thinking, and courage could tilt the balance. He advanced closer to the cocoon. The prince's scales were faintly visible beneath the crystal lattice, shimmering like liquid fire. Kalen felt a pang of emotion, a mixture of fear for what might happen and hope that he could succeed. He whispered softly, though the words were more for himself than anyone else. "You can come back. You must. Valkyrian needs you." A crack ran along the crystal, a tiny pulse of movement. Kalen's pulse accelerated. The citadel groaned, energy lines surging unpredictably. His tools glinted in the light as he rigged a temporary stabilization device, diverting dangerous energy into the wall's larger crystals. It was risky. One mistake could shatter the cocoon or electrocute him, but hesitation would be worse. Humans acted when others hesitated. That was their edge. From the shadows, another construct materialized, larger, sharper, its gaze locking on Kalen. He ducked instinctively, rolling behind a floating crystal pillar. The construct's claws clashed against the pillar, sending shards scattering. Kalen's mind raced. He couldn't fight it directly. He had to think differently, anticipate its movement. Using the momentum of the shards, he triggered a reflective pulse that confused the construct, making it pause just long enough for him to sprint to the edge of the chamber. Panting, hands shaking, Kalen reached a small ledge overlooking the cocoon. The Dragon Prince stirred slightly, responding to some signal he could not yet comprehend. Kalen's heart surged. He was closer than anyone had dared. But the citadel was not finished testing him. A surge of energy ripped through the chamber, knocking him off balance. Crystals cracked, floating shards spun violently, and alarms of dormant magic screamed in silence. Kalen gritted his teeth. He had no magic, only courage, intelligence, and a stubborn refusal to fail. The Dragon Prince needed him, and humans could rise where even the greatest spells had faltered. He steadied himself on a jagged crystal shard, whispering again, "Hold on. I'm coming." The citadel trembled, the Dragon Prince's cocoon pulsing in response. Kalen's journey into the heart of danger had begun, but survival, awakening, and the impossible task of saving Valkyrian hung by a single thread. Kalen crouched on the jagged crystal ledge, sweat dripping from his brow, lungs burning from the climb. The chamber trembled beneath the surging energy, shards spinning violently around him. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but the Dragon Prince remained suspended in the cocoon, fragile and distant. Magic had failed for centuries. Only human courage could reach him. Kalen drew a deep breath, forcing his fear into the background. He had no spells, no shield, no guarantees. Only his voice, his presence, and his determination. He approached the cocoon slowly, each step calculated. The crystal lattice pulsed rhythmically as if the Dragon Prince's heartbeat was trying to communicate, but it was too faint for anyone to perceive. Kalen had studied these rhythms for days. He had learned that life could respond to more than magic. It could respond to empathy, to intent, to understanding. Humans were fragile, yes, but capable of perception that no enchantment could mimic. Kalen whispered softly at first, his voice trembling. "Wake up. You are needed. Valkyrian is counting on you." Nothing happened. The cocoon remained still, perfect and silent. Kalen's pulse quickened. Every second wasted risked the citadel collapsing, or worse, the Dragon Prince never awakening. He tried again, louder this time, not with commands but with words that carried his heart. "I have traveled across fire, through danger no magic could protect me from. I am here for you. You must return. You are not alone." A flicker ran along the crystalline shell. Not a roar, not a movement, but a tiny shiver of scales beneath the surface. Kalen's eyes widened. Hope sparked, but the room remained treacherous. The wards, sensing energy, surged with violent pulses. Shards of crystal whirled, threatening to slice through the chamber like knives. Kalen ducked behind a fractured pillar, heart racing, and adjusted his stabilizer device. Sparks flew, but the energy was directed safely into the wall's larger crystals. He realized something crucial. The Dragon Prince was not simply asleep. He was waiting, testing, resisting intrusion. Sorcerers had failed because they tried to force him awake. Kalen understood now that connection, not power, would be the key. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the prince's mind, imagining the centuries of solitude and silence. He whispered again, this time not commands but stories. "There are humans in the colonies, living with nothing but hope. They fight, they build, they survive. They refuse to surrender. I am one of them. And I am here. For you." The cocoon trembled more visibly this time, subtle movements cascading across the crystalline lattice. Kalen's heart jumped. He felt a thread of recognition, a response that no spell, no ritual could ever produce. The prince was listening not because of magic but because of understanding, courage, and intent. Kalen's voice grew steadier, stronger. "You are not trapped. You are needed. You can save Valkyrian. The world depends on you as I depend on you." A shard flew dangerously close, slicing through a floating crystal. Kalen leaped aside, barely keeping his balance, but he did not stop speaking. The hum of magic in the cocoon shifted, reacting to his words. Tiny cracks appeared in the crystal surface, delicate fissures that glimmered with life. The dragon prince twitched. Scales gleamed beneath the lattice, fire faintly flickering. Kalen's heart pounded. He was witnessing something no human had seen in centuries, a living guardian responding, awakening to a human's voice alone. The chamber convulsed, energy surging unpredictably. Wards flared and sputtered, threatening to collapse. Kalen worked frantically, moving stabilizers, redirecting energy, using his ingenuity to prevent disaster. He realized that courage alone was not enough. Humans had to act, adapt, and solve. Each movement, each adjustment, kept the fragile balance between awakening and destruction. One misstep and the dragon prince could die, or the citadel could crumble. Kalen's whispers turned to a steady chant, not magical, not powerful, but deeply human. He recounted tales of sacrifice, survival, and loyalty, stories that carried weight beyond spells. We humans endure. We fight when hope fades. We rise when the impossible stands before us. You can rise too. A small pulse of light shot through the cocoon, like the heartbeat of a living star. The dragon prince flexed a claw, then another. Golden eyes opened slowly, revealing intelligence, curiosity, and recognition. Kalen froze, afraid that a sudden move might undo everything. The dragon's gaze held him for a moment, as if acknowledging the human who had dared to try. No magic, no force, just understanding and bravery had reached him. The chamber fell silent for a heartbeat, a moment suspended in danger and awe. Then the cocoon cracked, a fine web of fissures expanding outward. The dragon prince's massive form began to shift within, muscles stretching after centuries of stillness. Kalen stepped back, heart racing, knowing the hardest challenge was still ahead, controlling the surge of awakened energy without destroying the citadel. He whispered once more, soft but determined, "You can do this. We are here with you." The dragon prince's head lifted, wings tensing, and for the first time in centuries, a living guardian stirred. Kalen's eyes narrowed. The prince was awake, but the citadel trembled violently. The room was unstable, shards spinning like blades, energy surging dangerously. One wrong step could kill them both. Kalen clenched his fists. Courage alone had awakened the dragon. Now human ingenuity would have to save them. The dragon prince stretched inside his crystalline cocoon, golden eyes blinking slowly, testing the world that had kept him silent for centuries. The chamber shuddered violently with the surge of energy released from centuries of dormancy. Shards of crystal spun like deadly whirlwinds, sparks licked the walls, and the very floor quivered beneath Kalen's boots. Every instinct screamed danger, but he could not retreat. Humans survived impossible odds not by running but by acting. He had awakened the dragon, now he had to guide him. Kalen's hands shook as he adjusted the stabilizers he had rigged earlier. Each device was a precarious balance between holding the energy and redirecting it safely. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the citadel could collapse, burying them both under tons of crystal. The hum of the dragon prince's life force grew stronger, resonating through the chamber like a living drum. Kalen's mind raced, thinking in patterns of physics, energy, and motion. There were no magical solutions left. Only human ingenuity. A surge of energy shot across the floor, striking a shard that fractured violently. Kalen ducked just in time, sparks burning past his shoulder. He gritted his teeth and recalibrated a stabilizer on the fly, twisting it to absorb the sudden overload. His heart pounded and sweat stung his eyes, but retreat was impossible. The dragon prince's awakening was fragile. If the energy became uncontrolled, the cocoon would shatter, and the dragon's body, untested after centuries, might not survive. The dragon prince flexed a claw, wings stretching, sending waves of energy rippling through the chamber. Kalen counted the pulses, predicting the patterns, moving with lightning-fast precision. He leaped over a shard that spun toward him, slamming a stabilizer against the wall to redirect its path. Sparks flew, illuminating his face with flickering light. His hands moved instinctively, wiring temporary energy channels, improvising with pulleys and reflective panels. Humans had no magic, but they had adaptability, determination, and the courage to face impossible odds. A massive surge hit the central pillar, shaking the cocoon violently. The dragon prince roared, a sound that reverberated through every crystal and echoed across Valkyrian's molten seas. The roar was not anger but confusion and awakening, a being of centuries of sleep testing the limits of its own strength. Kalen froze for a heartbeat, realizing that sheer courage alone would not be enough. He had to think faster, act faster, or the citadel, and the prince, would be destroyed. He noticed a pattern in the surges. They came in sequences, rising and falling like a wave. Kalen's hands moved with clarity, adjusting each stabilizer to anticipate the next pulse. One by one, he redirected energy toward the outer crystal walls, dispersing the volatile currents safely. Each adjustment required precision, but Kalen's mind was sharp, fueled by the stakes and by the knowledge that failure was not an option. The Dragon Prince's eyes locked on Kalen, and for the first time, Kalen felt a direct connection. No words were spoken, yet understanding passed between them. The dragon sensed the human's courage, the ingenuity that dared to challenge magic itself. Kalen felt the weight of responsibility press down like a physical force. He could falter, but the dragon could not. He whispered softly, not commands but encouragement, "Steady, you're safe, we will get through this." Another surge came, larger than the last, and Kalen barely had time to redirect it. Crystals cracked and spun dangerously, shards flying past like knives. He rolled behind a pillar, leapt over debris, and slapped a stabilizer onto the largest conduit of energy. Sparks danced across his skin, but he did not scream. Pain was irrelevant. Survival demanded action. Humans survived where others failed because they acted when all seemed lost. The Dragon Prince flexed his wings again, stronger this time, and the cocoon began to shatter outward. Golden scales emerged, catching the light of the pulsating crystals. Kalen watched, heart pounding with awe and fear. He had never seen a being so powerful awaken before his eyes. But he could not gawk. The chamber still trembled. The shards spun violently, threatening to pierce both dragon and human. He adjusted his last stabilizer, connecting it to a series of mechanical reflectors that redirected energy into the outer crystal spires. A massive pulse ripped through the room and Kalen was thrown off balance, landing hard against the floor. Pain shot through his side, but he scrambled up. The cocoon cracked fully, fragments floating outward, revealing the Dragon Prince in all his glory. Flames licked the walls, refracted across the shards, painting the room in brilliant light. The dragon's eyes, ancient and intelligent, regarded Kalen with what seemed like gratitude. He had succeeded. Humans had succeeded where magic had failed. The Dragon Prince spread his wings, energy radiating from him like a living storm. Kalen steadied himself against the floor, exhausted, bleeding but filled with awe. The dragon flexed, testing the chamber's limits, and Kalen moved instinctively to stabilize what remained. Every adjustment, every calculated motion, kept the awakening from destroying the citadel. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were cunning, courageous, and relentless. Finally, after a tense heartbeat that stretched like an eternity, the chamber stilled. Crystals hummed gently, the shards suspended safely, and the Dragon Prince lowered his massive head. His golden eyes studied Kalen, as if recognizing the human who had risked everything to wake him. Kalen fell to his knees, chest heaving, relief and pride mingling in an overwhelming wave. He had done the impossible. Yet even as he breathed, the citadel groaned. Energy still pulsed unpredictably, and the molten seas below trembled with anticipation. Kalen knew this was not the end. His ingenuity and courage had won the first battle, but the dragon needed guidance and the world itself needed saving. The hardest challenge was still ahead, leading a newly awakened, immense creature through a fragile, unstable citadel without triggering disaster. He rose slowly, steadying himself. "We move forward," he whispered to the Dragon Prince. The dragon tilted his head, wings twitching as if understanding. Valkyrian had survived centuries of silence, but now it had a human standing boldly at the center of its destiny. One human voice, one mind, one heart, against impossible odds, had sparked the awakening. Kalen took a deep breath. The next step would decide everything. The Dragon Prince spread his wings fully for the first time, filling the chamber with a golden light that refracted across the fractured crystals. The power emanating from him was immense, almost uncontrollable, yet Kalen did not flinch. He had survived molten valleys, deadly constructs, and surging magical energy. This was no longer about courage alone. This was about guiding the awakening of a being who could remake Valkyrian. Humans had no magic, but they had heart, ingenuity, and a stubborn refusal to fail. Kalen had all three. The citadel trembled as the Dragon Prince flexed, testing his strength after centuries of stasis. Crystals spun dangerously, shards threatening to fall into the molten seas below. Kalen moved quickly, adjusting stabilizers and redirecting energy. Each action had to be precise. The smallest miscalculation could shatter the floating fortress. Sweat and blood streaked his face, his body trembling with fatigue, yet his mind remained sharp. Humans could be fragile, but they adapted, calculated, and survived where magic alone failed. "Follow me," Kalen whispered, his voice steady, though his body shook from exhaustion. The Dragon Prince lowered his massive head and stepped toward the outer platform, wings tensing like coiled springs. Sparks flew as the massive body brushed against floating shards. Kalen directed energy away from the spikes with makeshift pulleys and reflective panels. It was dangerous, insane even, but human ingenuity thrived on the impossible. Below them, Valkyrian cities flickered with unstable energy, and molten rivers shifted beneath the floating spires. The Dragon Prince's awakening was sending ripples across the world, and every second counted. Kalen's mind raced. He calculated energy pulses, mapped trajectories, and moved stabilizers before the next surge even hit. Humans could not channel magic, but they could manipulate the world through thought, tools, and courage. This was the essence of humanity, the ability to act decisively when everything else failed. A sudden tremor rocked the citadel. A shard the size of a boulder broke free, spinning toward the platform. Kalen leaped, catching it with a stabilizer and redirecting its energy safely into an outer crystal wall. Sparks flew, and the air crackled with residual magic, but he did not pause. The Dragon Prince's wings flared, sending a pulse of heat that threatened to melt parts of the floor. Kalen adjusted his devices on instinct, redirecting the excess energy outward. Every heartbeat was a test, every motion a fight against collapse. The Dragon Prince roared, a sound so powerful it vibrated through Valkyrian's floating cities. People in distant colonies felt it as a tremor, a warning, and a miracle. Kalen watched the massive creature, awe and fear mingling. This was no longer just a dragon, it was the world's guardian reborn. He had guided the awakening, risked everything, and survived, not because of magic but because he was human. That stubborn determination, that refusal to give up, had made the impossible possible. The prince stepped onto the main platform, wings fully extended, and beat them carefully. Energy radiated outward, stabilizing the citadel and dispersing the dangerous currents. Kalen adjusted the last stabilizer, letting the Dragon Prince's own power flow into the crystals, creating a balance between living energy and fragile architecture. The citadel shuddered once, then stilled. For the first time in centuries, it felt alive and stable but not dangerous. Kalen sank to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. The Dragon Prince lowered his head to Kalen's level. In those eyes, Kalen saw understanding, recognition, and gratitude. He had not commanded the dragon. He had not forced him. He had connected through courage, intelligence, and presence. The moment was brief but profound. Kalen's mind swirled with relief, pride, and awe. Valkyrian had survived centuries of silence, and a single human had reminded the world what humans could achieve. As the sun rose over the molten seas, its light caught on the Dragon Prince's golden scales, reflecting across the floating cities. The wards of the citadel pulsed softly, harmonizing with the dragon's life force. Valkyrian's magic, unstable for decades, began to stabilize, flowing through the cities and islands. Humans and other beings would feel the shift, an almost imperceptible reassurance that hope had returned. Kalen smiled faintly, knowing the colonies below would never forget this moment. Kalen stepped away from the Dragon Prince, bloodied and exhausted, and looked across the molten horizon. The world was alive again but fragile. He realized that his journey was more than saving a dragon. It was proof that humans, ordinary humans with courage and ingenuity, could make a difference against impossible odds. Stories would be told of the human who awakened the Dragon Prince, but Kalen cared little for fame. He had acted because it was necessary. That was enough. The Dragon Prince spread his wings once more, soaring into the sky above Valkyrian. Energy pulsed from him, stabilizing the floating cities and reconnecting ancient networks of magic. Kalen watched, heart swelling, as hope returned to the world. The people of Valkyrian would rebuild, and humans would be remembered as the ones who dared when others despaired. Kalen felt a gentle nudge at his shoulder. The Dragon Prince's massive head lowered, eyes meeting his again. It was not a gesture of dominance but of acknowledgement. A bond had been forged, not by magic but by courage, by determination, and by the human heart. He turned toward the exit, looking back one last time at the Dragon Prince soaring above. The citadel was stable, the cities alive, and Valkyrian was safe, for now. But Kalen knew this. Humans had risen where magic failed, hearts and minds had triumphed, and even in the darkest silence, courage could awaken life. Valkyrian's future was uncertain, but one truth was undeniable. Humans could defy the impossible. and for the first time in centuries the world felt alive again.